DMing can be a lot of work. There's adventures to come up with and NPCs to design and all kinds of things to create if you want to homebrew your own adventure and campaign setting. You can absolutely use a pre-written adventure or module. There's a lot of great ones out there. Wizards of the Coast is making great ones all the time, but sometimes you want to create your own thing or steal something from another person's game or a movie or a TV show to make it easier for yourself because you think those things are cool and you don't want to have to come up with them on your own. This video is about how do you do that? How do you rip something off without your players being able to tell, hey, wait, you just stole this plot from something else? Let me start with a demonstration. Your players are staying in the local baron's castle and the surrounding town after their adventure, and they're spending the night in a tavern, hanging out, spending their gold. In the middle of the night, they're woken up by screams of townsfolk, and these townsfolk are being attacked by bandits, legendary bandits that maybe the players have heard of, or people in town could inform them about. These are famous bandits who raid the countryside. Everybody's heard stories of these bandits. These bandits are especially merciless and brutal, and tales of their brutality range far and wide. They never leave any survivors in their wake. The players, being the heroes that they are, go out and fight some of these bandits, and they encounter some of them. They're pretty difficult to kill for bandits, but maybe that's because, they just have so much experience with fighting and raiding towns that they're pretty high-level bandits. Well, eventually the players kill a few and go on and kill some others, and then the raid sort of stops, and the bandits are all gone. The players go back and they start to loot the bodies that they killed, but there are no bodies anymore. They didn't leave anything behind. Where they had this combat, it seems like, other than blood, nothing happened. Very strange indeed. Well, the next morning, things get even more strange. The local baron says, hey, my daughter was kidnapped by these bandits. Could you, local heroes, go and rescue my daughter? Absolutely, we're heroes. That's what we're here for. Your heroes reply, because they are cliches. And they race off after the bandits, and they have this whole cat and mouse game where they're trying to find the bandits and where they are and learn more about them and their lair and rescue this baron's daughter. And in the process of this, they learn something about the bandits. They learn that the bandits didn't leave any bodies because they're undead bandits. And in fact, they are undead bandits that have been cursed. They're revenants. They can't die. And they're trying to figure out, how can we end our existence? This is miserable. Well, there is a certain piece of jewelry, maybe a ring, that the baron's daughter had discovered in her mother's belongings, her dead mother's belongings, because everyone needs a dead mother, right? And so they're trying to figure out, how do we break this curse? Aha, we know about this ring, this special magic ring that is going to break the curse, but it's lost. Turns out that when the baron's daughter discovers this ring, the ring is now awakened and it calls out to these bandits. And these bandits come and they kidnap the baron's daughter as well as the ring that they need to free themselves from this existence. And the players have to get there in time before the baron's daughter is executed, because her blood sacrifice will be necessary to free the revenants from their curse. Now, you are all smart and clever individuals. You have figured out by now, I hope, that this is the plot of the Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Changed a couple of details and shifted some things and made it maybe not quite so obvious if you were in the middle of it playing through sessions of that it is clearly Pirates of the Caribbean. Here is my chunk on advice for how to steal things, rip things off, and your players maybe don't notice. Take non-fantasy things and put them in your fantasy game, because players are much less likely to spot the plot of a Star Trek movie than they are to spot the plot of The Lord of the Rings, if it was in your fantasy game. Also, if you have an old, wizened, wizardly individual who goes by the name of Randolph, son of Mandolph, then possibly your players are going to pick up on maybe this guy is just a Gandalf ripoff. So take non-fantasy element things, and the Pirates of the Caribbean is actually pretty close to a fantasy story, but it is high seas, swashbuckling, 1700s, so maybe the players wouldn't notice it. However, it's pretty clear once you start to realize this is what's happening, that it's the Pirates of the Caribbean. Here is the other huge thing to remember as a DM when you are ripping things off. If you're worried about your players noticing, this is critical. If your players do notice, which by the way they probably won't, but if they do notice, they probably won't care that you stole something. I have ripped off the entire plot of the movie The Mummy before, and my players didn't realize until it was very near the end of the final battle, and they went, whoa, this is the plot of The Mummy. This is awesome! We get to play through the plot of The Mummy! And that's critical because if your players notice that you are stealing something, that's kind of okay because they've never gotten to play through the story of those things happening. So my biggest advice for what to stay away from is don't steal fantasy elements because your players are much more likely to spot those. And also don't steal names if you can help it. In fact, it's often a good idea to Google a name that you're about to use so that you can just see, does this have any famous connotations? So that you're not like, wow, Xandar. Xandar's a great name for this bad guy or this cool place that they're gonna go to. Xandar's awesome. And then you get to the middle of your session and the player's like, Xandar? Isn't that from like Guardians of the Galaxy? So Google names before you steal them and make sure you're stealing more from elements other than fantasy, and your players will be much less likely to notice when you are ripping off the plot of your favorite movie that isn't maybe fantasy related. And even if it is, your players will have a lot of fun playing in that movie. They've seen Braveheart, but they've never got to play in the movie Braveheart. That's a great story to steal from. And one last element on ripping off NPCs, the way that I do NPC generation, especially if I want to steal from an NPC, is I often take a really famous NPC or character from a book or movie or whatever, and I change a critical element about them. Or I just rip them off from something far enough outside the realm of D&D. So for example, you take Doc Brown from Back to the Future and you just stick him in D&D and make everything he says about D&D and not nuclear physics. And it makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty good NPC. But you can also create really interesting NPCs if you just rip off a character and change a critical element. Like you take a character who's really interesting to you, let's say Gandalf. He's a classic wizard example. You take Gandalf and you make him really young, or maybe a woman, or maybe Gandalf's personality as a fighter, which doesn't actually change all that much, but that's a different video. So anyways, that's sort of my big high-level advice for how do you rip things off, famous things from other medias, and put them in your D&D game so that your players won't notice. One, I promise if you are ripping things off from non-fantasy things, your players are very unlikely to recognize that it is from something else. But two, I promise that if they do, they probably won't care because they'll think it's super cool that they get to play through the plot of this movie or book that they really love. So that is my advice for how to rip things off for your homebrew adventure or campaign setting. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.